Hi everybody, I'm Phil Liggett. They call me the voice of cycling, and I was a special guest on episode 85 of the famous Physical Performance Show, which is approaching its 200th edition now in February 2020. I just want to say congratulations to all the guys involved. It's a great listen, and I really enjoyed the small part I played in it. So here's to a very successful and happy new year.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go.
Hi everyone, this is Dave McNeill, Australian Olympian and new physiotherapist, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Physiocram and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist and exercise scientist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. We do this across a range of different episodes, expert editions, featured performers, coaches' corners, and interest editions. And on today's episode, the first featured performer of the 2020 calendar year, episode 199, that's right, 199, I'll share with you a conversation that I recently had with Australian dual Olympic distance running star Dave McNeill. This really is a tale of highs, lows, and learnings from sport. At the time of recording, Dave had recently wrapped up his physiotherapy studies at university, and had also, just days earlier, ran a scintillating 28.16 for a fourth place at the Australian 10,000 metre track titles of the Zatopek Classic. By way of bio, in the 2012 London Olympic Games, Dave finished 28th in the 5,000 metres. At the 2016 Rio Olympic Games, Dave finished 16th in the final of the 10,000 metres. In July of 2019, Dave marked his comeback with a 5K national cross-country title. But as you'll hear today, Dave's career has certainly also taken him through the wilderness years of injury. In fact, injury cost Dave Australian representation at the 2018 Commonwealth Games, where he was set to take part in the 5,000 and 10,000 metre events. And it was a bone stress injury which sidelined Dave. And as you'll hear today, that took Dave down a path of exploration where he was to discover that one of the causative factors of his injury had been training through a status of low energy availability, or as we've been exploring in prior episodes of the show, including last week's expert edition with UK-based sports endocrinologist Dr. Nicky Keay, many endurance athletes inadvertently and unintentionally find themselves in a state of RED-S Relative Energy Deficiency in sport. The flow-on effects can be detriments in performance, but also the effects can be found through a detriment in health. One particular flow-on effect of relative energy deficiency for athletes is low bone mineral density. And as Dave shares today, Dave had to confront that head-on when his bone mineral density came back very low in his lumbar spine. The learnings shared are many. Topics explored include how to navigate self-doubt, appraising readiness to perform, overcoming the fear of the pain that we put ourselves through when we take to an event, Dave's concept of old man strength, the idea of not looking at our training in isolation or in a vacuum, but rather over the long term, considering the bigger picture, the mistake Dave made in mistaking stable weight as being in energy balance, and Dave survives the physical performance round and touches on the many observations he took through his training time with prior featured guest of the show, US great Bernard Lagat. And in a nice little twist, I share with Dave a pre-recorded snippet from Bernard Lagat recorded at the 2019 Gold Coast Marathon, where Bernard outlined the things that he admires about Dave McNeill. So this is a fantastic feature performer episode to kick off the 2020 calendar year. Here is my conversation with Dave McNeill. Dave McNeill, welcome to the Physical Performance Show. We have been trying to line this one up for a little while, and it's been based around a busy running season for you and schedule, but also finishing up your physiotherapy studies, which has been a journey for you. So congratulations on the physiotherapy studies being completed.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me. It's probably nice that we did have it delayed, and now I can join you as a colleague, I guess.
Yeah, mate. Well done. And it's been a busy few weeks for you. Not only that, but just inside the last week, you ran a stellar 28.16 for fourth place in the Australian 10,000 metre track championships in the Zatopek. So congratulations. How did you reflect on that performance?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, look, I think overall it was a positive result. My physio degree was certainly challenging, and it certainly challenged my ability to prepare and train at the highest level that I could. But I was fortunate to have finished about a month before Zatopek and managed to put a good month together up at Falls Creek beforehand. And I think of how the fitness improved in that last month. Yeah, look, there's plenty of positives to take from it. It's always a bit tough coming fourth in an Olympic trials race. My coach asked me probably a week earlier what sort of pace I thought I could run, and I thought on a perfect day 28.20 might be ballpark where I was at. So I was a little bit under that, which was positive, and I feel really confident that I can get quicker over the next 6 months. So overall pretty happy.
In the next 6 months, obviously, Dave, you're looking eyeballing what would be your third Olympic outing representing Australia for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's certainly the number one goal. I'm aware now that I'm competing in an era of some absolutely stellar Australian distance runners, and this will probably be one of the hardest teams to make, I think. So I'm realistic of my chances, and I've been fortunate, as you said, to go to 2 Olympics, and I was pretty happy with my last performance in Rio, and I'd love to improve on that. And I think if I can make this team, that probably speaks a lot of, I guess, the shape that I'd have to be in to actually just make the team and hopefully run better than I did in Rio. So whether I make it or not, the main thing is if I can run some PBs at age 33, that'd be a nice silver lining as well.
Well, we will throw, as we record this, Dave, to a little clip from one of your running companions, Bernard Legat, who I think is a good model to aspire to. You're 33. You've got many years of good running left in you, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about this with a friend today, and it's been interesting, I think, not just in running, but across all sports, probably in the last decade, 2 decades. It's almost like a cultural shift in how people view high performance. And 20 years ago, a normal retirement age for an elite athlete would be, maybe late 20s, early 30s. The athlete in their late 30s was a rarity, but nowadays that's changing. And I think as more people prove themselves at an older age, I think it's changing how people perceive what we can do. We obviously know a lot more, I guess, from a high performance physiological perspective and how to maximize performance and how to train as an older athlete. And I don't think I'll ever retire from this sport. I may get to a point. I will get to a point where I'm not competing at a super high level, but whatever level I'm running at, I'll enjoy it. But certainly optimistic that I still have my best running days ahead of me.
Well, I like to hear that, Dave. And we theme this show the highs, lows, and learn-ins. So we're kind of in this high zone at the moment. Mm-hmm. You said you need to be in good shape to make the Australian team. Your fellow Australian team runner, former featured performer of the show, Stuart McSwain, broke the Australian record, taking a few seconds off Ben St. Lawrence with 27.23, I think it was.
Yeah.
So, what shape, what other qualifying marks that you need to be hitting, and by when?
The 10K is a little bit different to most of the other track distances. Some listeners will be aware that the qualifying procedure for Olympics and World Championships has recently changed, and where it used to be based on a qualifying time, and then the discretion of each country to send whichever up to 3 athletes they wanted. It's now based on a world ranking system, and that system's based on not just time, but at the type of meet that the performance is run at. Running a fast time doesn't necessarily assure you of a high ranking if it was, at a relatively lower quality meet. But in the 10K, it's a little bit different because there's so few 10Ks being run around the world that irrespective of the quality of the meet, the main challenge is just to run as fast as possible. And the challenge for us, that there is an auto qualifying time of 27:28, so that's obviously what I'm aiming for. And I mean, it's speculation what time might actually get you into the Olympics in terms of a cutoff, but yeah, go big or go home, I guess. So that's what I'm aiming for, and yeah, we'll see.
You mentioned you're looking to improve by making this third team on your final, when you made the final in Rio for the 10,000 metres and finished 16th. If you had to look back at your running career and pick a highlight, something that was really special to you, could you nominate a performance and the reason why it's so significant for you?
Yeah, I'd almost say that my Rio performance would be up there with the best. There were some other performances that, races that I won, special places like the Zatopek in 2008 and an NCAA title. But Rio for me was the thing that made that particularly special. Was I guess it was the culmination of getting as much right on the day. And you think about it, the Olympics are once every 4 years, and trying to put your best foot forward in a single half-hour period in your life once in 4 years to get it perfectly right on the day is a hard thing to do. And I wouldn't say that I got it perfectly right, but I was probably as fit as I could possibly be. I was probably mentally in the best headspace I could be. And in terms of executing a race plan, I almost executed it as well as I possibly could have. So there was a lot to be proud for, and the main thing for me was that I had my whole family there, and that's a huge motivator for me. And knowing they were there, doing my best on the biggest stage, that was certainly something to be proud of. And yeah, learned a lot from that for sure.
What would you say was your top learning? Probably
from the mental side of things was probably the biggest thing for me. In terms of getting everything right from a training perspective, it's so easy to get into shape and then let nerves and doubt kind of sabotage the performance. And I don't know if you've ever run a 10K on a track, but 25 laps is a lot of laps, and it's compared to, say, a 10K on the road, it's a bit of a mental struggle. So maintaining focus, particularly when it starts stinging a little bit, is hard to do. So I think what I did leading up to it, I spent a bit of time working with a sports psychologist. I think for me, I had confidence in what I'd done, and I think I got onto the start line just really calm. I knew what I was capable of. I knew what I had to do, and I just didn't doubt myself, which has certainly been I reckon an undoing in a lot of other races I've had. So yeah, I guess the importance of being in a good mental headspace from a performance perspective is at least for me, is absolutely invaluable.
It's so interesting to hear you say in the past you've potentially sabotaged your performance and the nerves and doubt. You stood on that start line in Rio. I think any athlete of any level, everyone's experienced nerves and self-doubt.
Yeah.
The word sabotage is it's a fairly strong word. Would you say, Dave, that it's, in the past for yourself, it's been intentional or just unintentional sabotage because perhaps you didn't have some of the strategies to, in your words, get on the start line with a good headspace?
It's never intentional. A common thing that you experience as a distance runner is that there's often a point in a race where it gets particularly difficult. It's kind of that sort of that fork in the road in the race where, whether it's the pace picks up and you're deciding whether to go with it or not, the tempo just gets relentless and you're not sure if it's it's smart to keep going at that tempo at the risk of blowing out. Those are the points where there have been many instances where it's almost like I've negotiated with myself, and it hasn't been in terms of the end result, it hasn't been a good negotiation. And it's often those ones where you think, gee, I finished and I felt right. I really should have covered that move then, or done this or done that. And that was actually probably the one error I made in Rio, was that there was a break in the pack early in the race, and I was behind about 2 or 3 runners that got separated, and I kind of stuck with them rather than trying to bridge the gap. And I eventually did bridge the gap, but I probably did it a little bit too quickly, and probably paid for it a little bit as the tempo sort of picked up. But just things like that, having the mental fortitude to really just embrace the pain. And knowing that you'll be all right at the end. Like, it's not going to, which it probably won't kill you. That human threshold for danger is obviously set at a small enough threshold that you're probably not going to risk killing yourself. So you can kind of push through it a little bit. I'm getting better at it.
I listened to you share there, Dave, and obviously with your exercise science background, physiology background preceding your physiotherapy studies, how much of that's the scientist speaking versus the athlete speaking, it really doesn't matter. But yeah. I think what will resonate with so many people tuning in is that we've all stood on the start line, no matter what the ability of the athlete, and felt that fear of the pain. It's like, this has to hurt. Yeah. So to hear you then say you're getting better at it, does that mean that this is an acquired skill that can be ongoingly developed?
Yeah, I think it's something you have to work on, and you have to work on it regularly. That's absolutely been something I've realised. I probably most of 2018 I spent injured on the sidelines, and basically didn't race for a year. And anytime I think anyone sits out a long period of racing, the first few races back, you forget. Sometimes you forget some of that stuff, and you forget what you're capable of doing, and where that sort of threshold is for you. And I was fortunate to race quite a lot this year, and I think that helped, just kind of reminding myself of what I can do when the time comes to try and maximise the performance. Yeah, but I absolutely need a regular stimulus of that, and whether that's regular racing, focusing on certain parts of your training schedule, where you might be doing particularly hard reps, or where you just the goal is like, don't drop off here, or don't let the pace drop here. But it's definitely like working on that mental side of like negotiating those instances. Definitely needs regular practice.
So, I've jotted down there, Dave, regular stimulus, practice, get into a start line where you can, I guess, practicing in training, obviously. And then I'm curious, practically, how did the sports psychology help you ahead of Rio? What were some of the practical things that you implemented to be so calm on the start line and not afraid of the pain that was to ensue?
I guess actually just looking at my training and kind of acknowledging what I'd done, just acknowledging a lot of the things that had gone well in the preparation. Kind of, we've always got a choice whether to focus on the more positive side of things or the negative side of things. And invariably, at least for me, I found focusing on the positive aspects usually puts me in a more confident, stronger frame of mind, and allows me to be, the best version of myself. And, I could have focused on aspects of training that, I didn't hit a session, or, my mileage hadn't been as high this time round, or this and that. There's always positives and negatives when you're kind of appraising your readiness to perform. If you're getting ready for a race and it's coming up, it doesn't help. It doesn't help to be thinking about those negative things right before you race. It's probably worth thinking about them after a performance, and assessing how can I do this differently next time. But when you're actually, in the last stages of your preparation, that's when you need to start getting some confidence, and then just being calm. it's hard to be calm when you're running in an Olympic race.
I mean, it sounds like a juxtaposition of words, of terms, to be calm in an Olympic final with the stadium screaming. Wow. Dave, before we jump into the lows, because you've certainly walked an interesting journey, I think one that can offer so many people some encouragement and hope and some key insights. But I'm just curious, you mentioned you had a good month of training ahead of the Zatopek, sort of on wrapping up some of your university commitments. What does a good month of training, what did it look like? What sort of things were you getting done to, then line up and run a 28:16?
Sure.
Volume-wise, strength and conditioning, etc.
Yeah. So, look, nothing much changed from what I would normally do. Look, a typical week was, and I should preface this by saying I went up to Falls having just recovered from a partially torn plantar, so my mileage had been pretty low as I headed up there, and then I built it up a little bit from week to week while I was up there. But look, a regular week was Monday, Wednesday, Friday was easy hour runs in the morning, and then Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday was 8x K reps with a minute recovery, just kind of like a nice sort of, for us it probably equates to something between 10K and half marathon sort of effort. And then Thursday, while we were up there, we were doing kind of a progression run. So we did an 18K run where the first 9K was just an easy jog, and then the second 9K was sort of a bit more up tempo. So not quite at a lactate threshold, probably just a little bit below, but enough to get your heart rate up and feel like you're working a little bit harder. And then Saturdays we were doing 800-metre hill reps, and they were just with a jog down recovery. And then Sundays for me was a 2-hour long run. And then, I had 3.5 weeks up there, and one of the kind of process goals for me was to start adding second runs into my training, which I hadn't done for a couple of years. So the first week I just ran once a day. The second week I added in one double run, and then in the third week I added in 2 double runs. That was kind of training leading up. So that side of things is not particularly special. The thing I think that makes the difference in terms of really topping up your fitness is that we're in a training camp environment where we're spending a lot of time really focusing on recovery and just really relaxing in between sessions, rather than me doing sessions at like 6 a.m. and then going to placement all day and being on my feet. Stuff like that makes a big difference. And I think also just it was kind of like a little pressure relief after my physio degree had finished. So riding that wave of having just finished up something really helped me to embrace taking it pretty easy in between training sessions. So and just sleeping a lot better, not having an alarm in the mornings, things like that make the difference. It's you're only as good as your recovery is, I guess.
Yeah, and I love that example of that, and the adage from Shona Halson, Dr. Shona Halson in the recovery sciences, that the only training we're benefiting from is the training we are recovering from. I mean, it's so simple when you say it, but it's just so powerful. Yeah,
100% agree. And I think there was another episode you did with there's an Australian coach, Dick Telford, and he talked a little bit about the effect of at the end of a marathon build up where you start reducing the mileage and you're removing that cloud of fatigue. And I think that's the thing with distance running is, you're always kind of, it's a game of pushing the limits. That's what it is. And you're trying to get as much recovery in between sessions as possible. And, early on in a training cycle, you might be, 70% recovered before your next session, and then as you start to taper towards like a key performance, then maybe between sessions you're getting to 100% recovery. So definitely is a super important thing.
And what was harder, 25 grueling laps at 28:16 pace or the physio degree, Dave?
There's no question here. It was the physio degree. It was 100% the hardest thing I've done, harder than 2 Olympics. I guess my brain muscle is probably not as big as my heart and leg muscles, but
I doubt that. And Dave, interestingly, like mileage, I think most runners recognise mileage, and obviously there's
Yeah.
That doesn't tell the whole story at all. It only tells a little snippet of it. But, leading into this 28-16 with what you just outlined, your weekly mileage, if you like, would have been about what?
So it went like this. I think it was about 120 the first week, about 140 the second week, and then about 135 the third week, and then kind of the week of the race was about 100K, I think. Yeah, that's sort of ballpark, yeah.
For a runner of your capabilities, we're not talking about mega miles here.
No, and look, it's something that's changed a bit over my career. I spent a lot of probably 2014 to 2016 more in the 160K sort of range. I think probably in the next sort of 6 months, there will be periods where I get back up to that sort of level. Something that my coach Nick says to me, and look, it's not really, I don't know if there's much science really behind it, but it kind of does make sense. But as a probably a bit more of a slight runner, like I'm only about 53, 54 kilos, which probably a bit lighter than most. His kind of theory is that the smaller, slighter runners probably don't need as big a mileage as maybe some of the sort of heavier set guys, whether that's for like a weight maintenance thing or just trying to maximize the training effect. But look, I've had some success at high mileage and I've had success at lower mileage. But I think for me at this point in my career, I think one of the things that makes the most sense to me is it's that old term, old man strength, and I mean you can kind of laugh at it, and it's a funny idea, but I think a lot of people get too in the habit of looking at a training cycle in a vacuum and looking at whether it's your typical sort of 8 to 12 week marathon prep or whatever training cycle people are looking at. They look at a training cycle in a vacuum and they don't sort of give credit for all of the training that's come before it and all of the mileage that's been in the legs. And I've been running for probably 15, 18 years, and I've been doing over 100K per week probably since I was about 20, 21. So there's a lot of Ks in my legs, and probably this is the physio speaking a little bit more but I think also what you need as you get older to maintain performance probably changes a little bit. So there's probably a little bit more focus on gym work for me now than high mileage. But having said that, there will still be times where I do high mileage, but probably not as regularly as I used to do.
Fantastic. Let the physio speak, because let's go there about the strength and conditioning, Dave. Old man strength, certainly something that I feel like I've just sort of wrapped a better concept around. Is that concept in my professional work as a physiotherapist about athletes or runners? They really can make a decision. Are they going to be a builder or are they going to be a boom buster? And as you said, athletes walk a fine line. It's the nature of the beast. You're going to go over the limit at times. But it's that recognition, as you said, to not see a cycle in a vacuum, but to take into account you're building for the next X amount of seasons to be your best. And the cycle of starting and stopping, isn't just the fitness. There's so many things that you then have to gain back. So I really like that old man strength. Gym, you mentioned gym, strength and conditioning. What role has that played for you recently, and what does it practically look like, Dave?
Yeah, so I'll be the first to admit that it was probably the thing that suffered the most during my physio degree. It was probably the thing that got kind of put on the back burner the most. The running was reduced, but probably the gym probably suffered the most. But I did get back into a good routine while I was up at Falls, and for me, it's twice a week. I was fortunate enough to work with a good strength and conditioning coach at the University of Melbourne this year, Tony Sefton, and so we worked on a few different things this year. We kind of did some of the heavy sort of squats and just sort of very, very generic sort of lower limb type stuff. But then we also spent probably a bit more time, particularly in the second half of the year, working on I guess probably the easiest thing to call it is kind of core work. I like to kind of think of it as maybe a little bit more functional core work. So engaging the core in sort of movement patterns that are a bit more related to running. That was probably a big component for me recently was more core engagement work than doing the really heavy lifting, which I have done in the past, and I think it will continue to play a role for me, undoubtedly. But because I did kind of miss a bit of time of lifting during the year, I kind of wanted to, particularly while I was up at Falls, I didn't want to add too many pieces all at once. That was kind of the focus recently. But I think one of the big things for me, particularly for 2020, is I've had some issues with my plantar this year, and I think one of the things that I really want to do is not just improve my calf strength, which certainly has improved in the last 3 months, but I want to improve my power as well. I know in older runners that, and particularly from a physio perspective, it's becoming probably a more popular target from a performance perspective is trying to really focus on that sort of elastic recoil in tendons and improving their resilience to load and being able to return that load as you push off the ground.
And so practically you've just changed your execution of some exercises in the gym, or added plyometric stuff, or that's always been there?
Look, to be honest, I'm not quite at the plyometric stage yet. Still, I guess, dealing with a bit of stiffness in it, and whenever I do plyometric stuff, it doesn't respond terribly well at the moment. That's kind of the goal for me, to get to that point where I can do some more of that.
You're listening to dual Australian Olympian Dave McNeill sharing on the highs, lows and learnings of his running career to date. Support for today's show comes from Physiocrem. Physiocrem is a topical massage cream containing natural plant-based ingredients, ideal for the temporary relief of muscular aches and pains. If you're conscious of what you put on your body, you'll be happy to know that Physiocrem does not contain parabens or hydroxybenzoates, and its non-greasy formula doesn't leave any sticky residue behind. Physiocrem can be found Australia-wide at your local Coles, chemist or health store, as well as their online shop. They've offered listeners of the show 20% off the entire range simply by using the coupon code POGO, P-O-G-O. Jump over to physiocrem.com.au, Physiocrem.com.au to redeem this special offer. Herding Sacks and Physiocrem have got your back. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. Our philosophy is very simple. We do not want to see you for a single session more than what you require. We just want to help you celebrate completing your rehabilitation and getting back to your physical best and across what we term the physio finish line. To find out more about Pogo Physio's award-winning services, including our 1-hour initial appointments and our very popular telehealth online consultation services, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Australian distance running star Dave McNeill. Dave, we've covered the highs, the lows. I think anyone that's followed your career on any level has certainly seen you, I guess, walk through the wilderness for periods of time. Can you outline a little bit of the chronology of some of those recent years? I mean, we've heard you get back to fine form lately, which is exciting. Yeah. Yep. But it wasn't always that way. So what would you say has been the darkest day in your career? And let's walk through the challenges.
Look, I've had my fair share of injuries, and probably the worst one was start of last year. I just qualified for the Commonwealth Games in the 5K and the 10K. Yeah, probably had gotten back into the best 5K shape I'd been in probably 6 or 7 years, and things were going well, but I'd kind of been dealing with sort of this nagging SI joint awareness for a couple of months, and had been getting it seen to and getting some treatment, and wasn't really clear what was going on with it, but wasn't really getting any worse. It just was kind of there and didn't impact my training at all. But then, suddenly, probably about 3 weeks before the Commonwealth Games, I just finished a run and I couldn't walk afterwards, and was just in a world of pain, and had a few days off, tried again, same issue, even worse this time, and So I went and got a scan, and it ended up being quite interesting. And it was probably only the start of the journey. But I'd had a bone spur. Part of the SI joint, which is a fibrous joint, had ossified or turned to bone, and that portion of bone had fractured within the joint. So that was probably what was causing my pain. But having said that, from all the people that I've seen and spoken to since then, it's hard to say where the pain was coming from and what caused what and what came first. But anyway, that kind of derailed my my Commonwealth Games, which was bitterly disappointing. I really was literally, like, when I'd qualified, it was the highest of highs. I was also running on fumes. I was working a job 2 nights a week. I was doing placement from 8 till 4 every day, and I was still training twice a day, like at 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. And I mean, I look back on it now and I wonder how I lasted as long as I did. But I qualified for the Com Games and ran, faster than I had in a long time. And I think I just thought at that point, gee, I can do anything. But yeah, I definitely broke down pretty hard after that. And it was a long recovery. It was 3 months of no running after that. And then it was kind of a failed restart at the end of 2018, which resulted in another stress reaction in my sacrum. And then, that was kind of that was when, started to find some other potential explanations for things. And I had very, very low bone density in my lumbar spine, and low, but not quite as low bone density in my pelvis, I think it was. Then that sort of brought up issues of another thing that's, I guess, been talked about a bit more in recent years is this relative energy deficit in sports, and that was another potential, I guess, contributing factor for me. And that was kind of a new learning for me. And then I was fortunate to meet a pelvic specialist physio in Sydney at the start of this year, and that after seeing her, things really started to pick up after that, and got on top of things. So that was probably it was a 12-month journey kind of on the sidelines, and definitely probably the lowest of lows for me.
Were there any times through that where you thought you might not get back, Dave?
To be honest, I don't think so. I think I'm a pretty stubborn sort of person, and I think given how well things had gone prior to the Commonwealth Games, I think that had given me a little bit of hope that, hey, I've still got some good running in me. So I think that, and knowing what I was doing with my physio degree, I just thought, gee, if I can just get through this and then put some more energy back into the running again, I might be able to finally put some of the wisdom I've developed over the years to work, and maybe run better than I've ever run.
It's an area I certainly have had to personally work through, being diagnosed with low bone density, and then retrospectively thinking through how that could be. There's a genetic component on my side, my father's side of the family. But Dave, I remember when I first discovered I had low bone density in my lower back, I felt physically weak. I was like, but I'm fit, I'm strong. This is not something a 36-year-old at that stage should be getting on a report. How did you process it? And, you're at the pointy end of sport. How did you process it?
I guess I just took it in my stride and just listened to people as I was kind of given news, and had a really good sports doc down in Melbourne, Paul Blackman, who he sort of looked at things that I certainly wouldn't have thought to look at, and certainly identified some things, like even when I had the scan before Com Games on my SI joint, nothing had kind of come up on the MRI, and he didn't think it fitted and ordered a CT scan as well, and that was where things started to show. And then once I started running again towards the end of the year, and then got derailed again, that was when he thought, oh, you haven't been running that much. Let's maybe have a look at your bone density. And look, I just took it in stride, and I like to think I don't have too much of an ego, so he had me see one of the dietitians at Olympic Park, Jess Rothwell, she's a former Olympic teammate of mine, a race walker, and she was fantastic. And we kind of picked apart my diet. And I think one of the misconceptions I'd had was that my weight doesn't fluctuate very much. So whether I'm, in heavy training or injured and not running, my weight doesn't change very much. So my kind of thinking was, if my weight isn't changing, then I'm probably eating enough. I'm probably replenishing everything from training, but that's not always the case. You can have stable weight and still be in relative energy deficit, and you see it in other ways. And one of the ways is in minerals leaching out of your bones, and that's kind of what happened for me. So we tweaked my diet, and maybe an additional challenge for me is that I'm a pescatarian, but I'm mostly vegetarian. I eat fish occasionally for social occasions, and if I go out, I kind of thought, oh well, look, I'm eating I'm eating a pretty varied plate of veggies on my diet, on my plate, and so I thought, oh look, there should be plenty of calcium coming from all the green leafies and all of this, and one of the things that the dietitian kind of identified for me was that there's probably one of the issues was probably absorption, and there just being too much fiber in the sources of calcium that I thought was giving me a pretty balanced diet. I did have to. I decided to go down the route of including a bit more dairy in my diet, and that's worked fine for me. And I haven't had it. That wasn't a problem for me. I quite like milk and cheese and things like that. And yeah, thankfully I've been okay since then. And I'm probably due for another bone density scan to check it up. But yeah, fortunately, I haven't had any more bony issues this year, which is good.
And I think it's probably maybe not encouraging is the right word, but it's just interesting that even at an elite level of performance, it's certainly getting more airtime in recent times with some international exposure with some individual athletes making headlines. But this concept of relative energy deficiency syndrome, but it's the tricky part is it can be unintentional as for you, and I think it's certainly something that until I had to look into it, I made the same assumption: stable weight, therefore I mustn't be lacking in energy. But I think it's worth just putting out there it's not always the case. So
I think the other thing to point out is that while there is often a mental health overlay to this discussion, there isn't always. And like you said, sometimes it is unintentional, and it's not necessarily the right thing to assume that it's the result of an intentional practice to try and be an ideal weight or something like that. Often it is. Often that there is a mental health overlay to it. But I was fortunate that I was working with people that there wasn't any judgment around it, and for me, I'm fortunate from that perspective. There wasn't a mental health overlay. It's not something that I focus on from whether it's a body image perspective or a performance perspective. If someone says I'll run a minute faster if I'm 10 kilos heavier, then I'll probably go and do it. In fact, the dietitian said I probably would run a bit quicker if I put on a few kilos, and I've tried. I maybe put on one or two, but
well, no, that's great. And the mental health overlay, as you say, Dave, in the form of disordered eating or intentionally, calorie restricting through, orthorexia or whatever it may be. So Dave, well done. Thanks for taking us there. And if you had to sort of summarise the biggest learning you've taken through sitting on the sidelines, what would it be?
Oh, it's a good question. Look, I think for me, and it's probably different for everyone, but for me, and it's funny, kind of probably a nice segue, but I guess from a mental health perspective, I've always kind of struggled from whether you want to call it an anxiety perspective about, being on the sidelines or worrying about, when you're coming back from an injury, is this niggle an okay niggle or should I be worried about it? Things like that. That's always been an issue for me. So I think probably the biggest learning for me has just been I tried to enjoy the time off that I had. I rode the bike more just to get the heart rate up and feel like I'd done some exercise, which for me is important just to feel well. I personally didn't really worry about, trying to maintain fitness or anything like that. I exercised every day because I wanted to, but I didn't exercise to try and maintain fitness. And I took the opportunity to obviously put a bit more energy into my physio degree. Acquired a girlfriend last year, so focusing on other things and keeping my mind active in other spaces, and kind of distracting from focusing too much on, the negatives of being on the sidelines and not being able to run and things like that.
You mentioned the word anxiety. In my professional work, I often it's sort of amusing in many ways that the folks that tend to gravitate towards these quite rigorous pursuits, distance running, I do observe that I think if you had to put people on one side of the spectrum as depressed or anxious, they're probably more the anxiety-prone individuals. And and it always, it really points to the fact that when you are injured and you don't have those coping mechanisms there, it's a real challenge. So lots of wisdom there that you've shared about enjoying the time off and focusing on other positive pursuits. You're listening to Australian dual Olympian Dave McNeill sharing around the highs, lows and learnings of his career to date. If you missed last week's Expert Edition featuring Dr. Nicky Keay, UK-based sports endocrinologist, it is an episode you are going to want to jump back and enjoy. Dr. Nicky Keay shared around hormones, health and performance and did a real deep dive into low energy availability and the consequences for athletes, otherwise known as this concept we've been exploring, RED-S Relative Energy Deficiency in sports. If you value performing at your best, which I know you do, that's why you tune into this show, then jump back and enjoy Dr. Nicky Keay's sharings on episode 198. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Australian dual Olympian Dave McNeill, sharing on his highs, lows and learnings. Dave, are you ready for a physical performance round?
Let's do it.
Here we go. Dave McNeill, training session most disliked?
Would be 800 metre hills. But at the same time, I relish doing them because I think I get the most benefit out of them. Yeah.
Training session most loved?
Probably any Nick Bideau Melbourne Track Club Tuesday track session during summer. Something that really, really just tests your will.
Favourite pre-race meal, Dave?
Let's go with sushi.
Post physiotherapy degree, bedtime and morning time?
Okay, morning time, coffee, usually porridge and ABC News.
ABC
and
News.
Then evening time, probably a little too much Netflix that I'm willing to admit.
It's all fine now. You've finished your studies. Who's the athlete you most admire and why?
I think Bernard Legat would certainly be up there. He's a stellar human being, and obviously, has performances that are, that rival the best, and one of the most impressive resumes. But I could name too many, but on the spot, that's the guy.
and you've spent time training with Bernard, and what would be your biggest lesson you've taken from being on the ground training with him?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of it is probably from that mental side of things. Like he's a one cool, calm, collected person, and I was fortunate to spend a lot of time with him in 2011 in particular. I lived with him at his house for a couple of months and was training with him in Germany, and he does his training. He trains well. There's nothing like super remarkable about it, but he's a family man. He got his training done, but the highlight of his day, particularly then, and his kids are a little bit more grown up now, but for him, like his world centered around his family, and I think having for him that outlet meant that he wasn't. That my perspective was that it meant that he wasn't spending time, sweating the small details, whether a session was perfect or not. But then, he lined up to race, and He was, particularly, from 2000 to basically 2016, he was the master tactician, and he executed races perfectly because I think there was a calmness about him, and he backed himself. It just goes to show, like, I got to train with him up close and, doing all the same things he was doing, but there's a vast difference between us when we got to the start line. And, obviously some of that's experience and more years of running in the legs, but, a lot of it I think was his mental fortitude and his calmness.
Toughest competitor you've ever raced, Dave, and why?
Brett Robinson. He's one of my training partners at Melbourne Track Club, but he impresses me so much. He's just one of the toughest guys out there, and he's definitely someone you can learn from about the value of knowing how to negotiate with pain when it comes, because he throws caution to the wind sometimes, and he is one tough competitor.
Dave, is there a mantra that you use when you race or compete? Some regular self-talk?
Yeah, one I've used recently, particularly this year. The one I used was just a little like a four-word sort of phrase. It was "not today, go away." So when things started getting tough, I'd say "not today, go away," and just keep plugging away, keep pushing through.
Not today, go away. I like that. Dave, best recovery tip?
Best recovery tip is do something puts a smile on your face. Do something that makes you happy, whether it's, having a coffee with your friends afterwards, talking some smack, or a good bit of banter with your training partners afterwards, but just enjoy yourself and just to kind of get away from thinking about training so much and, sweating whether the session was perfect or not. I think that would be my top one. Obviously, rest and sleep and stuff like that, but do something that makes you smile, makes you kind of, puts you in a good headspace.
I mean, that fits in with your observation of Bernard Lagat. He had his family there to turn to, right? One word that describes your racing style, Dave?
I'm going to be a little bit negative here and say sporadic. I'd say my performances have been historically a little bit up and down. Maybe that's just me being overly critical. Sometimes I hit it well, and then sometimes I stink.
Well, let's see that change, and I think you're on the way up. Dave, how would you describe being in the zone?
I think kind of what we've touched on already, being calm and being confident in your preparation, whether it's for a race or whatever you're preparing for, and taking that into your performance.
When was the last time you were in the zone?
I'd say on Saturday night.
I think that 28.16, there you go, 10,000 metres. Dave, the hardest training session you've ever done? Last question in the performance round.
Yeah. Hardest one I ever did was this is a good story, actually. It was an 6 by 800 metre hill session. I was with a group of Melbourne Track Club at Mount Laguna in 2015. I had been experimenting a little bit with not drinking coffee and not having caffeine. I wanted to see whether if I stopped drinking caffeine and then started again, whether it might have a bit more of a kick. So one morning, after having not had a coffee for a couple of weeks, I had a coffee, felt absolutely fantastic, and got out, and I was on fire. It was literally the best session I've ever done, to a point. So normally these reps, like a good time would probably be in the low 240s, so maybe like 241, 242. And then occasionally you might hit a sub 240 by the end if you're going well. So my first rep was 238, and I was like, oh, all right, better be careful here. The next one was 237. I was like, oh, geez. The next one was 236. The next one was 235. The fifth one was another 235. And then I started the sixth one, and I got about halfway up, and it's hard to describe, but it was almost like my legs were paralyzed, and I got halfway up, and I couldn't lift my legs, and I just hit the ground. I was like, oh man. And you just kind of at that point, you're like, oh, you're not really thinking clearly. You're just like, I've got to get this finished. So I tried to pick myself up. I finished the rep. I don't know what time I ran for the last one. It wasn't that quick. And then I crumbled in a heap at the top. And then I wanted to get up and start recovering, and I just could not get my legs to turn on. And I was with Ben St. Lawrence and our massage therapist, Rich Squires, at the time, and they said, just wait here. We're going to go get the car and we'll drive up and pick you up. And so they jogged down, and I was sitting there just feeling like a useless sack of so-and-so. And I was like, oh man, come on. Why can't your legs turn on? This is just bizarre. I'm using my arms to try and get myself up and must look really funny. And I find a big stick on the side of the road. I kind of managed to like drag myself with my arms over to this stick, and I propped the stick up in the air, vertically. And I tried to climb up the stick with my arms and try to get myself up on my feet. And as I was doing this, Benny and Rich arrived with the car, and they they took a photo of it because it did look quite funny. And I actually inherited a new nickname from that point, and they've called me ever since then the Wizard, because I look like Gandalf with his big stick.
I think that photo needs to see daylight, Dave. So how about a post up that one? You post that one up on social so we can all see.
I'll send it through.
That'd be fantastic. Dave, well done. You're out of the physical performance round there. You mentioned there as your most, the athlete you admired most, Bernard Lagat. And at the 2019 Gold Coast Marathon, where Bernard ran a Masters marathon record. This is what he had to say when I asked him what he most admired about you, Dave, as a fellow training partner of his in the past.
So if somebody was to ever ask me what is the best thing that you know about my friend and a longtime friend of mine, David McNeill, what are the things that you can think of David McNeill when you just, hear about him, that name, David McNeill? I would say the number one thing that I know about him is that he's a masterful front runner. He's not afraid to help in the workout. I remember when we were in Tucson, Arizona, David could actually get out there and help you out very much, and he could push the pace like, nobody else have ever done it before. So this is the guy that has all the strengths. He's not afraid to go to the front. He's willing to just help out, especially during the latter stages of the training, which sometimes you just feel so tired and you just want somebody else to help. So this is the guy that, if you have a teammate like that, a training partner like that, you're going to get the best out of the workout of that day. And that also translates into the overall preparation of whatever you're about to do, whether in a race itself or just to be able to train and be in good shape for what you're preparing yourself for. So he's a masterful front runner, and I use that word carefully because not a lot of people can master that ability. They don't have that ability to take the training and to race in front of everybody like that, and never looking back, just taking the stride by stride and working so hard to get to the point where he's going to be a legitimate contender in every race that he's in, working on it.
So there's some big praise from one of the legends of the sport, a masterful front runner.
Wow, I'm a little humbled, or very, very, very humbled. Not quite sure what to say to that.
Well, I think the takeaway might be that you never really know the effect that you have on others fully, but there you go, you've made an impression in your time living with Bernard and training. So I think,
look, I guess it is. It's funny he does say that because I think it's certainly maybe it's an inherent thing, but there is something about training, and particularly training with other people. Training has never been a competition. It's always been about working together and plowing through really tough sessions. And it's always been important to me. Like if I'm ever doing a session with other people, is that if it's a hard session, we're all doing our fair share to help each other out and to get through the session. If it's hard for you, it's probably going to be hard for them, and it's I guess that's something I've always valued, and actually it's certainly something that's very important part of the Melbourne Track Club culture as well. And obviously I joined up with Melbourne Track Club after my time with Kip, but I think it's a common theme in all distance running and being part of training groups is that's what training's about. It's about working together and pushing each other through. And some days And it's one of the benefits of training in a group is the consistency factor. You know, you can be having a bad day and someone else can be having a good day, and they drag you through, and vice versa, and it can be different on any given day. And yeah, I think it's an important part of a group training culture for me. And I'm probably not the only or not the best front runner, but I'm very humbled that Bernard said that.
Dave, if you could boil everything you've learnt through your career to date into one piece of advice to help listeners of the show perform at their own physical best, what would Dave McNeill's solitary piece of advice be?
I think spend some time thinking about why you're doing it. You don't have to get really philosophical, and you don't have to be religious. You don't have to believe in anything in particular, but ask yourself, you know, why am I doing this, and what's my purpose? And I think if you can find that and always come back to it, and it can be as simple as I just love the feeling that running gives to me when I'm physically like breathing hard and moving one leg in front of the other. I love that feeling. That it can be that simple, but always come back to that and you know, be grateful for that. And I think having that purpose, I guess, can really steer you through some of those lows in your career, and kind of keep you on the straight and narrow if you ever having doubts.
Oh, that's powerful, Dave. And Dave, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what is Dave McNeill's physical challenge going to be?
Mine would be get off the footpath and off the road and go do a run on a technical trail, or go do a run on a hilly course. A lot of people focus on mileage and speed and pace in their training, and one thing I found really valuable is actually like getting away from that and running slower on more technical terrain and more challenging terrain. I think if you do it in a nice measured way, and don't overdo it at the beginning, I think there's a lot of benefit from just using different muscles, getting a bit more mechanically and metabolically efficient. So maybe just vary up one run this week and move it from a flat even surface to something that's a little bit more technical, like a single track trail or a dirt road or something like that.
Brilliant. So practical and implementable, if there's such a word. Dave, where can we follow the journey from here? How can we find out more about your journey? You write very well. Can you tell us a little bit more about Dave McNeill's output?
Yeah. So probably the best places through the social channels, and I try and post some updates on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is RunDMC and then _NEILL, so RunD McNeill. Same on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter these days much. So that's probably the best. And usually if I do write something, then it's I'll usually post it there as well.
Dave, thank you for your open sharings and sharing your learnings of your career to date. And certainly we wish you all the best as you head towards hopefully Tokyo 2020.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a fun chat.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust you enjoyed Dave McNeill's sharings. If you did, then reach out and let Dave know. You'll find Dave easily over on Instagram at RunDMC_Neil. That is RunDMC_NEILL. Let Dave know what it was you took from his very open sharings, and also if you take on the physical challenge for the week. Whilst there, consider a screenshot of the episode you're enjoying at any given time and tagging in the Physical Performance Show at Physical Performance Show. If you have some feedback on how we can make the show better, then please reach out and let me know at Brad_Beer on social media handles, Instagram and Twitter, or via email b.beer@pogophysio.com.au. Massive thanks to those leaving ratings and reviews over on iTunes, and also those hitting subscribe. That really is the best way to help the show grow, as is sharing the show if you know someone in your running or training group who would enjoy Dave sharing today, then please consider sharing the link with them and spreading the love. A huge thanks to the team who make this show possible. Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, Matthew Walding on all things graphic design, and Daryl Misson on all things audio engineering. Another huge thanks, as always, to Physiocram for your ongoing support. As we always say, podcasts are free to download, however, they are not free to produce. So Physiocram, a massive and mighty thank you. Don't forget to take advantage of the Physiocram offer, 20% off any of their products. Their fantastic range over at physiocram.com.au, physiocrem.com.au. Physiocram is the cream of choice at Pogo Physio, and it is such a well-loved product. Now, my top 3 learnings from Dave McNeill's sharings. Number 1. Don't look at our training in a vacuum. Consider the bigger picture. Don't just consider the 12-week building block as Dave shared leading into an event such as a marathon, but consider the longer-term effect of what we're doing week to week in terms of the big picture of achieving our physical best. Number 2, do not make the assumption and the mistake being stable in our body weight equates to being in energy balance. It is possible to be stable in weight, however, not having our energy demands through our training and our daily life loads met by our energy intake. The consequences of this short term, the body can deal with. However, long term, it can result, as Dave shared in his own experience and my own personal experience, in people in their 30s being diagnosed with osteoporosis and low bone mineral density. So if in doubt, consult with a great sports dietitian about your energy availability. Do not make the mistake of assuming you're in energy balance because your weight is stable. Learning number 3, doing what's right for you. I was really impressed with Dave's maturity, wisdom, and discipline in sticking in his own lane. As he shared, he'd been training with his Melbourne Track Club teammates at Falls Creek, and whilst many of them would have been doing double run days, Dave was disciplined enough to slowly introduce double runs back into his weekly training. 1 double run first week, 2 double run days second week, and so on. Dave also touched on the fact that he wasn't yet ready for plyometric loading with an injury in his foot, his plantar fascia, that he has been rehabilitating. So even at the pointiest end of performance, discipline is required, and well done to Dave for modelling that. Now, coming up on next week's episode, it is episode 200. Can you believe it? I can and I can't. When we started the show, there was a determination to output the show weekly and not miss a beat. It hasn't been easy, but I'm pleased to say we stuck to that commitment, and we've outputted a show once a week for what will be 200 consecutive weeks. And then following the 200th celebration episode, get ready for some terrific feature performers and expert additions, including a conversation I had recently with the Ironman cowboy triathlon himself, that is James Lawrence. James set the incredible Guinness World Record of 50 Ironman triathlons completed in 50 days across 50 states of the USA. If you're yet to watch the Netflix documentary Iron Cowboy, then I highly recommend it ahead of the episode going live. So until next week's 200th celebration episode of the Physical Performance Show, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.